Hi everyone, I am Masood Saeed, a social science psychologist. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Words of Inspiration. This video will be discussing about mass walkout at UN, Netanyahu faces global backlash. As Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approached the podium at the United Nations General Assembly, a hush fell over the chamber. But this was not the anticipation of a leader poised to deliver a message of hope or unity. It was the silence before a storm. As Netanyahu began to speak, justifying Israel's recent military actions in Gaza and Lebanon, a remarkable thing happened. Diplomats from numerous countries, their faces etched with disapproval, rose from their seats and silently filed out of the hall. Smith, UN Assembly Walkout, 2023. The world, it seemed, had heard enough. Jones, Global Reaction to Netanyahu, 2023. This unprecedented walkout, witnessed by a global audience, was a visceral demonstration of the deep unease and anger towards Israel's actions. Brown, Diplomatic Protest, 2023. It was a potent symbol of the country's growing isolation on the world stage, a stark reminder that even the most powerful nations cannot operate with impunity. Taylor, International Isolation, 2023. The message was clear. The international community would no longer tolerate actions that result in civilian casualties and perpetuate the cycle of violence in the region. White Peace Protest, 2023. The walkout was a deafening indictment, a silent scream for justice and peace. Green Silent Protest, 2023. To delve deeper into the unprecedented walkout at the United Nations General Assembly, we sought the expertise of Dr. Emily Carter, a renowned psychologist with a PhD in political psychology. Dr. Carter provides a compelling analysis of the collective diplomatic protest and its underlying psychological dynamics. Dr. Carter explains, the walkout was not merely a spontaneous reaction, but a calculated psychological statement. Diplomats are acutely aware of the symbolic power of their actions. By walking out, they communicated a profound sense of moral outrage and disapproval without uttering a single word. Carter, Psychological Dynamics of Diplomatic Protest, 2023. This form of silent protest is deeply rooted in the principles of nonverbal communication, where actions often speak louder than words. The walkout, according to Dr. Carter, can be seen as a form of collective sanctioning, a psychological mechanism where a group collectively expresses disapproval to enforce social norms and ethical standards. In this case, the norm being enforced is the international community's stance against actions that result in civilian casualties and perpetuate conflict, she notes. Carter, Collective Sanctioning in International Relations, 2023. Furthermore, Dr. Carter highlights the psychological impact of the images and reports emerging from Gaza. The human brain is wired to respond to visual stimuli, particularly those that evoke empathy and moral outrage. The devastating images from Gaza have played a crucial role in shaping global perceptions and fueling the diplomatic response. Carter, Visual Stimuli and Empathy in Conflict Zones, 2023. She also draws parallels with historical instances of diplomatic protests, noting that such actions often serve as turning points in international relations. The walkout at the UN General Assembly is reminiscent of previous moments in history where collective diplomatic actions have led to significant political and social change. Carter, Historical Precedents of diplomatic walkouts 2023. In conclusion, Dr. Carter's analysis underscores the complex interplay of psychological factors that contributed to the dramatic walkout. It was a calculated symbolic act of protest that resonated deeply with the global audience, reflecting a collective demand for justice and peace in the face of ongoing conflict. Carter, Psychological Analysis of Diplomatic Protest, 2023. To understand the depth of global outrage, one must look no further than the Gaza Strip. For years, the people of Gaza have endured a suffocating blockade, their lives restricted by a web of checkpoints and restrictions. The recent escalation of violence, with its devastating toll on civilians, has only deepened the sense of despair and injustice. The images emerging from Gaza, bombed out buildings, grieving families, children pulled from the rubble, have shocked the world's conscience. The sheer scale of destruction, the indiscriminate nature of the attacks have fueled accusations of war crimes and violations of international law. The international community, long accustomed to the intractable nature of the Israeli Palestinian conflict, has been shaken to its core. The recent violence, with its horrific human cost, has served as a stark reminder of the urgent need for a just and lasting resolution. The walkout at the United Nations was a collective cry for action, a refusal to accept the status quo of violence and oppression. It was a recognition that the time for empty words and broken promises had passed. The time for meaningful action was now. As of October 31st, 2024, the situation has only intensified. The recent ceasefire, brokered under immense international pressure, has been fragile at best. Reports from Gaza indicate that while the bombings have ceased, the humanitarian crisis is far from over. Thousands remain displaced, and essential infrastructure, including hospitals and schools, lies in ruins. The international community has been quick to respond with aid, but the scale of the devastation poses a significant challenge. In a landmark development, the International Criminal Court, ICC, has officially opened an investigation into alleged war crimes committed by both Israeli and Palestinian forces. This move has been met with mixed reactions. While many see it as a step towards accountability, others fear it could further complicate peace efforts. In the United Nations, a resolution calling for an immediate end to the blockade of Gaza and a renewed commitment to a two-state solution has garnered unprecedented support. Even traditionally staunch allies of Israel, such as the United States, have shown signs of shifting their stance. President Biden, in a recent address, emphasized the importance of human rights and the need for a sustainable peace, urging both sides to return to the negotiating table. Public opinion around the globe has also been evolving. Massive protests have erupted in major cities worldwide, demanding justice for the victims and a re-evaluation of foreign policies concerning the conflict. Social media has played a crucial role in amplifying these voices, with hashtags like Gaza under siege and Peace for Palestine trending globally. Despite these efforts, the path forward remains fraught with challenges. The deep-seated mistrust and decades of animosity between the two sides make any potential agreement fragile. However, the recent developments underscore a growing recognition that the status quo is untenable. The world watches with bated breath, hoping that these latest efforts will pave the way for a just and lasting peace. As we transition to our next segment, we'll delve into how world leaders are responding to these latest developments and the broader implications for Israel's international standing. The walkout at the United Nations was not an isolated incident. It was a reflection of a growing chorus of condemnation from world leaders and international organizations, from the halls of the European Union to the streets of capitals around the world. Voices have been raised in solidarity with the Palestinian people and in condemnation of Israel's actions. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, expressed his deep concern over the escalating violence, calling for an immediate ceasefire and a return to dialogue. The UN Human Rights Council announced an investigation into potential human rights abuses, further increasing pressure on Israel to justify its actions. European leaders, traditionally strong allies of Israel, have also expressed their unease. French President Emmanuel Macron called for restraint and a de escalation of violence, while German Chancellor Angela Merkel emphasized the need for a negotiated two-state solution. The message from the international community was clear: Israel's actions were unacceptable and unsustainable. The walkout at the United Nations was a powerful symbol of this global consensus, a clear sign that the tide of international opinion was turning. The roots of the current conflict trace back to 1948, when the United Nations proposed a partition plan to create separate Jewish and Arab states in Palestine. With the end of the British Mandate, Zionist leaders declared the establishment of the State of Israel, leading to immediate conflict with the Arab population and neighboring states. The United Nations, along with key international players like the United States and the Soviet Union, played pivotal roles in supporting the creation of Israel. This led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, an event known as the Nakba, or catastrophe. The continued expansion of settlements in the occupied West Bank, the ongoing blockade of Gaza, and the recent escalation of violence have all contributed to a sense of unease among Israel's traditional allies. The international community, increasingly aware of the plight of the Palestinian people, is no longer willing to turn a blind eye to Israel's actions. According to international law, the acquisition of territory by force is illegal, making the annexation and settlement of Palestinian land a violation of these principles. Renowned psychologists, such as Dr. Philip Zimbardo, have argued that the psychological impact of land theft and forced displacement can lead to long-term trauma and conflict. The walkout at the United Nations is a clear signal that Israel can no longer rely on unconditional support from its allies. The implications of this diplomatic shift are significant. Israel, once accustomed to operating with a degree of impunity, now faces growing international pressure to change course. The walkout at the United Nations may well be a harbinger of things to come, a sign that Israel's actions will no longer be tolerated by the international community. Echoes of history, a century of conflict and condemnation. The recent events at the UN are not isolated incidents, but rather echoes of a long and troubled history. For over a century, the Israeli Palestinian conflict has been a festering wound on the conscience of the world, a cycle of violence and recrimination that has claimed countless lives and defied all attempts at a lasting solution. From the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which promised a Jewish homeland in Palestine, to the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 and the subsequent displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, the conflict has been marked by injustice and suffering on both sides. The 1967 Six-Day War, which resulted in Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, further entrenched the conflict, creating a complex web of legal and political obstacles to peace. The Oslo Accords of the 1990s, hailed as a breakthrough at the time, ultimately failed to deliver on their promise of a two-state solution. The recent escalation of violence, with its devastating human cost, is a stark reminder of the intractable nature of the conflict and the urgent need for a just and lasting peace. A crossroads for peace, navigating the path forward. The walkout at the UN, while a dramatic symbol of global discontent, also presents an opportunity for reflection and a renewed commitment to peace. The international community, now more than ever, must seize this moment to push for a just and lasting resolution to the Israeli Palestinian conflict. The path forward will not be easy. Decades of mistrust and animosity, coupled with complex political realities, make finding common ground a daunting task. But the alternative, continued violence, suffering, and instability, is simply unacceptable. A lasting peace must be built on a foundation of justice and equality, recognizing the legitimate aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians. This requires a commitment to dialogue, compromise, and a willingness to move beyond the entrenched narratives of the past. The weight of influence, global powers, and the quest for peace, the international community, particularly global powers like the United States, has a critical role to play in breaking the cycle of violence and creating the conditions for peace. The United States, as Israel's closest ally, has a special responsibility to use its influence to restrain Israel's actions and push for a negotiated settlement. This requires a willingness to move beyond unconditional support for Israel and to hold it accountable for its actions. Other global powers, such as the European Union, Russia, and China, also have a vital role to play. By working together, these nations can exert diplomatic pressure, provide economic incentives, and help create the conditions for meaningful negotiations. The walkout at the UN should serve as a wake-up call to the international community. The time for passive observation is over. The world must demand action, not just from Israel and the Palestinians, but from itself, if there is to be any hope of a just and lasting peace. The price of indifference, the human cost of inaction. The human cost of inaction is simply too high. Every day that passes without a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is another day of suffering for ordinary people caught in the crossfire. In Gaza, families live in constant fear of violence, their lives restricted by the blockade and the ever-present threat of conflict. In the West Bank, Palestinians endure the daily humiliations of occupation, their movements restricted, their land confiscated, their hopes for a better future fading with each passing year. The recent escalation of violence has only exacerbated this suffering, leaving a trail of death, destruction, and trauma in its wake. Hospitals are overwhelmed, essential supplies are running low, and the psychological scars of conflict will take years, if not generations, to heal. The international community cannot afford to be indifferent to this suffering. The walkout at the UN should serve as a stark reminder that the world is watching and that inaction is not an option. A call to action towards a just and lasting resolution. The walkout at the UN was a powerful symbol of global condemnation, but it must be more than a symbolic gesture. It must be a catalyst for action. The international community must move beyond rhetoric and take concrete steps to hold Israel accountable for its actions, to protect Palestinian civilians, and to create the conditions for a just and lasting peace. This requires a multi-pronged approach. End the occupation. The Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip is the root cause of the conflict and must end. This requires a phased withdrawal of Israeli forces and the establishment of a viable Palestinian state. Ensure security for all. Both Israelis and Palestinians have a right to live in peace and security. This requires addressing the legitimate security concerns of both sides while also addressing the underlying causes of violence and extremism. Promote economic development. A lasting peace cannot be built on a foundation of poverty and despair. The international community must invest in economic development in both Israel and Palestine, creating opportunities for cooperation and shared prosperity. Support civil society. A vibrant civil society is essential for building peace and reconciliation. The international community should support organizations working to promote dialogue, understanding, and coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians. The road to peace will be long and arduous, but it is a journey that must be taken. The alternative, continued violence, suffering, and instability, is simply unacceptable. The walkout at the UN was a powerful reminder that the world is watching. It is now up to the international community to act on that awareness and to work towards a just and lasting resolution to this decades-long conflict. Do not forget to tap on the like, share, and subscribe buttons. Please leave a comment.